I'm Mich Atagana and welcome to Venture Talk. Today we are going to talk about innovation in Africa, if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I have some interesting people with me in the studio today to chat about it. I've got Sarah Rice from Mxit. I've got Rapelang Rabana, former Yeigo founder and doing some interesting stuff she doesn't want to talk about just yet. And I've got Brett from AngelHub. So let's get into it. So today we want to talk about innovation. And a lot of the time Africa is kind of touted as the continent that will innovate in the future. We're going to build the next Google, the next Facebook. And a lot of startups and entrepreneurs arise and they want to innovate and build something amazing or a big company. But most of those startups are not making money. They're all failing very fast. And they're not actually finding easier ways to kind of monetize their business or viable ways to monetize their business. Investors don't want to invest because the risk is too high because they don't know how they're going to monetize this business. What is it a problem where we're suffering from too much innovation and not enough good businesses? Is innovation the death of Africa's tech world? Brett, why don't you tell us what you think?
I think innovation, it's inevitable. You have to have it, and I think it's not about whether there's too much or too little. I think the problem that we have is guys and girls don't know how to match innovation with the business and the survivability of their business. And for me, it's just like what you need to do as a person. You need to understand who you are and what your objective is. And with your business, if your objective is to go out and make money, then you need to structure yourself in a way that will make money and will attract investment. But if you're there to try and change something or to try and solve a specific problem, understand what it is you're trying to do and then try to marry that with a business model. Because too often we have somebody who has a nurse mentality who, for example, wants to cure something, change the world, but they're trying to fit into the box of the billionaire want to be. And we need to get that out. Your business needs to understand where it's going to go before you try for venture capital or because many people should never be going in that direction. So we need to stop trying to put everybody into one box, and people need to understand what they want to achieve. And once they know that, then they can go and find the people that are suited to help them reach that.
Okay, I mean, that's a really great point. Rapelang, now you're looking to play in the education space, and especially mobile education. Is this something you've seen with all the research you've been doing?
Sure. I think sort of just to give a general broad picture is that I don't necessarily think that there's far too much innovation happening in Africa. I think a lot of the people on the East Coast will say the same about the West Coast in the US. And it's not necessarily just symptomatic of Africa. What is particular here is that because it's a young industry, we do tend to hype things around a lot. We do sort of jump onto some bandwagons and buzzwords a lot. And innovation's a really nice word for people to jump onto. So instead of actually pushing the most important thing, have you found a value proposition, we sort of over-focusing on innovation. And that's a balance that needs to be corrected for sustainable business to become more frequent. And it's not that a sustainable business won't be innovative, it'll just innovate much more carefully, and the overemphasis won't be so loaded on the innovation. Once we come back to trying to solve a real value proposition and solve real problems, then the innovation aspect won't be so heavy, because then you're actually fitting yourself into your environment and solving a real problem, so you'll be able to get real customers and make real money. What I'll say for my perspective in the education space is that while there's a whole lot of social value in solving the issues of education in Africa, there is actually it's also a market that's growing very fast. And I do believe in the next 20 years, it'll be one of the biggest and most profitable markets around. So it's not entirely altruistic, and I do believe that profit incentives are crucial to be able to put in the R&D, to put in the right people, and it doesn't have to be the social element. In the beginning, you have to explore that value proposition. So my approach is to take it very slowly, to actually try and identify that value proposition that's available in the market now, and take your time about it. You don't need to expand, you don't need VC. This is the kind of explorations you do. You fund it out of savings and your salary, and explore that fully to identify that value proposition right now in a massive space. And that's how we should be approaching this problem. It's not something that is ready to be pitched and to get venture capital for, that actually money too early just accelerates you further in the wrong direction. And you need to simply figure out that value proposition right at the beginning. So if we reduce the hype, the buzzwords, and people sort of calm down, then we won't have so much of a need for the pitch contest, the need to look more innovative, and we can get on with life.
I'm really glad you brought up the hype, because that leads me to Sarah, actually. So,
Wow.
mostly because Sarah comes from a communication background, and you know, Sarah founded a company, but now works for Mxit. And you find a lot of the times, I mean, you've represented startups, you know, and a lot of the time is trying to get them out there that they're doing innovative things. And more often than not, you know what's going on in the background, but it's your job to kind of get them, hype them up and get them out there. Do you feel, I mean, Silicon Valley is, you know, a kind of ecosystem built on the hype. It's actually built on the media bubble rather than what's really going on in innovative thinking. Is it a problem? Is it something because we're trying to replicate this kind of Silicon Valley world that as an industry, the hype is important to us?
Wow. Yeah. So I think hype is important because it generates a lot of energy and a lot of interest, and it attracts people with money and brains, which is important when you're trying to when you've got a tech space as young as ours. I think what makes the hype so dangerous is that it brings in a lot of dreamers, and it brings in a huge amount of fantasy. And you get people who just want to be the startup entrepreneur, international playboy style role. And it's where the innovation in the startup is all around the fun and the networking and the deal making. And nobody seems to spend any time thinking about what it will mean when the business becomes fully operational. Yeah. And I think what you're saying about getting money too much money too early is a problem. I think it's a problem most of us would want to have, but what it does is it makes you lazy. And it also means you can buy into the self-fulfilling fantasy of awesome instead of going into whether the product is viable. Because there are lots of good ideas that won't make any money. You know, just because something's a good idea doesn't mean anybody else wants it. Yeah. And there are lots of, a lot of the times you see in South Africa specifically is where people, they kind of recreate, they take an innovation that already exists and do it again their own way. And you're just like, what is that about? That's not even innovative, you know. So I think hype is important, but I think hype needs to be also met with a sort of a sense of adulthood. Yeah. I just feel like our industry is still like a rather sort of hormonal teenager, you know, and we kind of need to start growing up a bit. And you know, what I'm hearing from you guys is, we're starting to get entrepreneurs who are being a little more grown up about money and the business. I think our biggest gap in the local tech scene is COO skills. You know, we've got a lot of visionary CEOs, and they are awesome, but you need decent COOs.
Someone's got to run the business.
Somebody's got to lead.
You know. Okay. Sure. All right. Well, I think that's kind of pretty much, you know, everyone seems to understand what the issues are. Now, Cape Town is specifically, the tech scene here it's almost like something out of the Great Gatsby, you know. It's a world of excess where we
haven't shot anyone yet.
Okay, let's try not to. I think maybe we should not, you know. You know, it's all about the sexy. You know, you talk about someone. So what do you do? There, I'm a startup, and you're like, okay, cool. But it's like they expect you to kind of give them a level of respect about that. I'm a startup. I'm with the cool guys. You know, I'm in this exclusive party, and a lot of the times it's the same people, and there's very little in terms of ideas changing. There's a startup that will be working on the same idea that is not a good idea for 6 months, and they just don't listen. So is it also a case where startups just don't know when to quit? Because at some point, you got to know your limits and be like, okay, you know what, I've tried this. Maybe it's time I figured something else out or got better advice around it. Our startups just so stubborn that they don't know that it's good to be a persistent entrepreneur, but sometimes you have to kind of step into reality a bit.
I'm reading the most amazing book at the moment called Necessary Endings, which I think everybody should read in business. And I think there's it's like hard to balance that sort of optimism and realism, because you need optimism to start and run a business, and you need a healthy bout of realism, and then you also need to be able to face your fears, your fears of failure, your fears of letting people down, your fears of looking stupid at the next party. And I think for a lot of startups, you know, we are brought up on these stories of jobs who would just not quit, you know, and then we start to see quitting as failure instead of quitting as like a completely natural response to a bad idea. So I think we're getting a lot of, I think entrepreneurs and the startup tech scene is getting a lot of mixed messages about what it takes to succeed. And there are too many mantras, you know.
You definitely, I mean, I think one of the big problems is you definitely need to have a really thick skin as an entrepreneur. You know, because you've got to deal with that constant setback, and you have to deal with repeated failures. And the truth is, many times we know the story, the Ackermans and all of that, who went through 7 failures before they got to the right, or 8 failures, and so you hear that, and it kind of says, all right, I won't quit, but I think the problem is, it's the guy who goes head down and then just keeps charging when everyone's trying to say, look, it's not that you're useless and that you have some good potential, but help us steer you. And it doesn't mean that you need to now listen to everybody who gives you advice. But there are plenty of guys who just seem to have taken that stubbornness to heart, and years later are still beating the same drum. And you feel really bad for them, because no one's had the courage to tell them, look, really now, stop, or they've kind of tuned everything out. And it's a really tough line, I think, for some people to be able to say, to have that honest evaluation. I mean, all of us here, and I certainly have hit that many times where I've gone, okay, enough, I need to draw the line here, and we need to call it quits. But it's really difficult.
It's
it
hard.
really is.
I mean, endings are tough.
Always. I mean, I'd like to add a sort of a different perspective. I'm not so sure that I know a lot of people, or too many people, who I think persevere too much. I would actually sort of say the opposite in my experience. And it's more, I think, the problem that the initial choice is not a well-considered choice. So a lot of the time, I think too many startups are started because it sounded cool, or my friend was doing it, and there wasn't enough self-reflection. There wasn't enough tapping into your own authenticity and insights, and the stuff that would genuinely you were genuinely interested in, to such an extent that you would build the right expertise in that subject matter. And there isn't enough of that. There isn't enough of, I think, startups who really want to be world-class experts in what they're doing. And that's why they keep working hard, but it's not smart enough, because they're actually not investing. It's not tapping into that deeper self in a sense. And that, I think, is the bigger problem.
It's the wrong guys who are stubborn and persistent.
I think it's that problem, that initial choice decision isn't considered enough, and I'm not so sure there's too much perseverance.
Okay, so I think that's really interesting, and we kind of understand where we are. You know, innovation is not really a problem where we have too much innovation, but it is important for us to kind of get the right business models out there, and entrepreneurs just need to kind of get up and do the work, and some hype, but let's manage that hype. I think that's kind of where we're all at right now. So just tell me, what are the industries that you think really need to innovate in this country, or in Africa in general? Let's start with Sarah.
I am a big fan of innovation around delivery. I think one of the biggest things we seem to struggle with here is just getting people to give us what we asked for. So I think innovation in the Cape Town restaurant industry around service would be awesome.
Okay, agree with you there.
Cool. I think we need a lot of innovation in the education space in particular, especially with sort of the number of young people coming out of the continent, the expected youth bulge, and exploring the role that mobile and internet can play there. I think there's a lot happening in education in the US space, but it's all sort of targeting vocational, it's all targeting PCs and broadband, and it's all about sort of putting stuff online that was previously on paper, so digital textbooks, online video lectures and stuff like that. So we're getting good at putting stuff online and on databases, but we haven't invested in how do we get knowledge into people's minds. And that's the big education question we're sort of going around by doing all the funky digital textbooks. We still have to create a new learning experience, actually put in a lot more R&D to do that, because no other continent is going to need it as much as Africa will.
Completely agree.
I think you guys are obviously 100% right. I mean, it's the two really big areas, and it's the stuff that we see the protests about, and it's the stuff we're always seeing the challenges there. But I think there's innovation opportunities in every space. For me, what's more important is that as soon as somebody creates something, they've got to be figuring out who's going to support it, because otherwise we're just wasting our time, And it doesn't mean you have to have loads of paying customers, but maybe you'll live in the social grant space and that. But figure out who it's for and who's willing to pay for it before you ever go and ask anyone for money, for investment, and that. And once you find that space, then you can figure out where you fit within the broader ecosystem. because we know we've got loads of innovative people. We know we've got entrepreneurs. If we can train them and just give them the opportunity, but not just in their skills, we need to train them in the business side of all of this.
Agreed.
And so for me, if we can find an innovative way to get business skills across to entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
there's something.
That
Yes.
is
I
a
think
good
that's
point.
awesome.
The one area as well that could really use innovation is around matching unskilled and semi-skilled labor with work,
Mm.
because we're just
Migration of
finding-
labour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're just finding that there is just no place for someone who is unskilled to try and find work on their
Yeah,
own. So I
that's
think
true.
there are lots of, definitely in the kind of, bringing people with semi-skills or low skills into the digital space where they're able to either upskill or do other tasks, digital tasks. So I think there's a lot of potential for innovation there that isn't really being tackled.
The sad thing is that I've seen over time so many people coming up with various job portals to via SMS and phone and all sorts of things, but the fact that it's still not out there, it's like the mobile one. Somewhere things are being missed. So before somebody goes and tries to create a new app, go and figure out where the market failure is. That's where we're getting it wrong. People try to push. They go, I've got a new app. This isn't happening, so I'll design an app for it. Go find out where the market failure is.
Because there is an app called Uusi. It's
Yes,
on
there's
Mxit.
two,
and and it's doing
Mm.
amazing work. But it was designed by this amazing man called Terence, who for most of his life is unemployed, and he's now been matched with some business people to try and get the kind of business and ideas right. So I think often it's because entrepreneurs come in from the top, like, oh, I see the social problem, I shall fly down with my internet knowledge and save you.
Yes.
And I think that's also what, particularly with social entrepreneurship, I think we've got to get a little bit dirtier. Before we start finding solutions.
Awesome, guys. We're gonna have to stop you there. We could go on forever.
We could,
but let's end it there. I think there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff that's come out of this, and I'm really grateful that you all came out and to chat to me about this. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Venture Talk. This is Mich Atagana, and tell us what you think in the comments.